When I first moved into the house on Oak Street, I was thrilled. It was an old charming Victorian, the kind of place I'd always dreamed of owning. Sure, it needed some work, but I was excited to bring it back to life. Little did I know, it had a life of its own. The first few weeks were uneventful. I spent my days sanding floors, painting walls, and fixing leaks. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of place where everyone minds their own business. But then, strange things started happening. It began with small, almost unnoticeable events. Doors that I was sure I had closed would be open. Lights I had turned off would be on, and tools I had left in one room would be in another. At first, I chalked it up to my own forgetfulness. Renovating a house is stressful, and I figured I was just tired. One night, after a long day of work, I settled into bed with a book. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards. I was just about to fall asleep when I heard a noise from downstairs. It was a faint, rhythmic tapping, like someone was gently knocking on the wall. I sat up, listening intently. The tapping continued, steady and deliberate. I grabbed the flashlight from my bedside table and crept downstairs, my heart pounding. The tapping seemed to be coming from the kitchen. I pushed open the kitchen door and shone the flashlight around. Everything looked normal. I checked the windows and doors. Everything was locked. Just as I was about to head back upstairs, the tapping started again. This time, it was coming from the basement. I hesitated. The basement had always given me the creeps. It was dark, musty, and full of old, forgotten things. But I had to know what was making that sound. I opened the basement door and flicked on the light switch. Nothing happened. The light bulb must have burned out. I took a deep breath and started down the stairs, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The air grew colder as I descended, and the tapping grew louder. When I reached the bottom, I saw something that made my blood run cold. In the corner of the basement, an old rocking chair was moving back and forth, creaking with each motion. There was no draft, no reason for it to be moving. I stood there, frozen in place, watching it rock. Then, as suddenly as it started, the chair stopped, and the basement was silent once more. I backed away slowly, not taking my eyes off the chair, and hurried back upstairs. I locked the basement door and went back to bed, but sleep was impossible. Every creak and groan of the house made me jump, my mind racing with fear and confusion. The next morning, I decided to ask my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, if she knew anything about the house's history. She was an elderly woman who had lived on Oak Street her entire life. When I mentioned the strange occurrences, her face grew serious. "That house has a troubled past," she said. "Years ago, a man named Mr. Carter lived there with his family. They were reclusive, rarely seen by the neighbors. One night, a terrible storm hit, and Mr. Carter disappeared. His wife and children were found in the basement, locked inside. Some say they still haunt the place, waiting for him to return." I didn't know what to think. Ghosts? Spirits? It sounded absurd, but I couldn't deny that something was wrong with the house. I decided to stay with a friend for a few days, hoping some time away would help me clear my mind. When I returned, the house seemed quiet, almost welcoming. I convinced myself that it had all been in my mind. a result of stress and exhaustion. But as I settled back into my routine, the strange events resumed. Objects would move on their own, and I would hear whispers in empty rooms. The tapping in the walls became a nightly occurrence. One night, determined to get to the bottom of it, I set up a video camera in the basement, aiming it at the rocking chair. I wanted proof, something tangible to explain the unexplainable. I turned off the lights and went to bed, my heart racing with anticipation and fear. The next morning, I retrieved the camera and played back the footage. At first, there was nothing but darkness and silence. Then, around midnight, the chair began to rock, slowly at first, then more violently. And then I saw it, a shadowy figure standing behind the chair, barely visible in the dim light. It reached out a hand and pushed the chair, making it rock faster and faster. The figure then turned towards the camera, and I felt its eyes bore into me through the screen. I turned off the camera, my hand shaking. I couldn't stay in that house another minute. I packed a bag and left, moving in with a friend until I could sell the place. I never went back. To this day, I don't know who or what was in that house, but I do know one thing. Some places are haunted, whether by spirits or by the memories of the past, and the house on the Oak Street is one of those places.